Hi, this is Ben with Farm Debt Help. Today's discussion is about distressed operations. I'm going to go over some background, what's going on, try to paint a picture of the landscape, and talk about how it can be a isolating and lonely experience from what I've seen. So first of all, there's a few premises that I think is you have to go over, because if you don't, it's so easy in these situations to have non-meaningful conversations because there's a lot of emotion and people talk past each other. Um, but I would start with is that we have to get back to you have to boil it down to just the essence of what's going on. Now, there can be a lot of causes for why this is happening, but so first of all, just get one thing out of the way. So farmers operate in a price taking industry, meaning they can't dictate prices, so instead they have to be efficient with their costs. So what farmers have to control is how they produce what they produce, meaning the biggest way is what's your mix of land, labor, and equipment. That dictates to a great extent the structure of your costs, how your cost structure is. Let me just give an example. So let's just usually to give examples, it's best to give simple examples. So let's say you have a farmer that farms 1,000 acres of, doesn't matter the crops, but they have enough equipment to farm 4,000 acres. Just off the bat, that's probably a problem because it costs to have excess equipment. Even if you have it paid for, you have all your capital wrapped up in it, which usually don't have it paid for, because if it were all paid for, you probably wouldn't be in a bind. So usually when we're talking about a distressed operation, we're also talking about an operation that has some level of debt, and usually a relatively high level of debt. So that's a starting point, a mismatch of labor, equipment, and land. The way to think about it is, are these things basically right-sized, or are they in harmony? Do they have a chance of working? So if you had a nameless balance sheet and a nameless financial statement and it was totally generalized, theoretically you could give that to a group of 10 financially astute farmers, or you could give it to a group of 10 good credit/lenders, and they could probably judge it fairly accurately on whether this is just a good setup. Meaning, if you had, hey, here's our equipment, we farm 1,000 acres, this is our land debt, this is the land we rent and how much we pay, and this is all of our equipment debt, this is our personal debt and everything. I think you could have someone quickly look at that and say, my God, I mean, I need to know more. Was this a big operation that scaled down and that's why they have this much equipment? Or are they thinking they're going to expand a lot? Or is it just they just had a real drive to have high level of equipment? And I know I'm focusing on equipment, but it's kind of the easiest example. You could also have a mismatch of labor, and that's a common one too, because sometimes there's pressure in a family to include more people, obviously, if it's the intent to have a family run operation. So sometimes you might look at something and say, there's just not enough. You got 3 families, and it's a stretch to have 2. I mean, you could maybe do 1 and like a part-time hired man. But if you have 3 families all thinking they're gonna like live off this, it's just not working. And then you combine maybe suboptimal machinery purchases and just kind of decisions that are not the best. So the point is that every operation, doesn't matter who it is, I can say this 100%, every operation has a structure. You can look at the size and scope and how they do what they do. Then you have to ask, is that an efficient setup for what they do? That then answers the question, does this have a chance of actually working? That's my point. You have some farmers that are struggling. You have to separate 2 things. you could have a farmer that is the best farmer in the sense of being a farmer. What I mean by that is like a daily execution of farming tasks and farming whatever's going on. Maybe if you tagged along, if you were like a third party and you said, gosh, I had an opportunity to last Tuesday to go out and ride with so and so, and that he knew, this went wrong, he knew how to fix it. Like, hustled, hardworking, competent, conscientious, couldn't have done anything better, knows how to do everything, great daily farmer. But if they are operating on an operation that has a way out of sync cost structure that just doesn't really have a good chance, irrespective of who's executing it on a daily basis, that's the issue. Is you could have someone, so then you take that person and they're like, hey, I'm struggling, I can't, we lost money again this year, I guess I'll just work harder, or it's my I'll get to this, or it's my marketing. I just, there was a brief window for about a month where corn was above whatever, and if I would have sold, I knew I should have locked in then. If I would have, well, let me rebut that. It's usually not about timing of selling grain. Yes, in a given year, there's going to be a range of what you could have sold your commodity for. The point is that the operation needs to be structured such that hopefully it doesn't have to hit the high. Because if you have to hit the high, that's not a realistic plan, because no one knows when the high is. And when you're in the high, you might think it's going higher. And that's the way things go. You can't knock someone for not selling at the high. They could legitimately think it's going higher. They could read articles and talking to neighbors and doing whatever research they do, and their gut tells them, like, God, I just felt all along this market, it's going higher, and you can't fault anyone for that. So that's what I'm getting at. There's a structure to the operation that's either it's a sliding scale, and sometimes it's not easily to say. It's kind of like an umpire. So pretend you're an umpire and you're behind the plate and you're watching a ball come in. You can tell when it goes over the head and hits the backstop. That's a ball. That's not a strike, right? In the same way, you can look at an operation and they are just so overcapitalized, or they have too many people. It's just, the setup is just not, you can just be like, I don't have to be the best umpire in the world. I'm not an umpire at the, championship game trying to tell if that ball barely crossed the corner of the plate. This isn't a close call. Like, this has almost no chance of working, and it might actually be a compliment to someone that they've made it work this long with this card stacked against them. The point is, so you ask, how do you solve that problem? Do you solve it by marketing better? Do you solve it by just working harder on a day-to-day? I would answer no. I would say what we need to do is get your structure so that, irrespective of who you are and how capable you are, and I'm highlighting someone who's ultra capable. What if you have a double whammy? What if you have a cost structure that's out of sync, and then you have an actual operator that has a drinking problem, or, like, I don't know, has other issues, or isn't really the best farmer? Like, then that's another problem. But I would argue that you need to first have a viable farm structure that has a chance to work, irregardless of who you are. Meaning, you could tell someone, hey, this is how I'm sitting right now. This is my balance sheet. This is the equipment I have. This is how much I'm farming. This is what I'm doing. This is my help. This is just the lay of the land. Now, we're in the winter here, this time of year when I'm making this video. As we look forward, does this have a chance of working? And if you gave it to 10 financially competent farmers, or 10 good lenders or credit people, and there's just unanimous agreement basically between them, like 9 out of 10 on each are like, yeah, this seems reasonable. I mean, this seems like this should work. I would contrast that with a situation where you gave to the same 10 farmers and 10 lender credit people, and 9 out of 10 of them all say, this just this is just doomed from the gate. Like, there's no way this is gonna work. Like, you know, again, we'd have to learn more of how they like got to this, but like, this just doesn't work. Now, how do you fix that? You have to change the structure. To change the structure, you have to change the size and scope of your operation. Usually means downsizing, because it's usually hard to unilaterally grow, and usually growth isn't really the issue. You can argue that technically growth could be an issue, because you say, well, if I got the equipment, if I spread it out over more acres, then that would help right size my problem. And it would. But it's usually like forced growth or pressurized growth is usually risky, because people are going to lower their standard of what land they're willing to rent or what they're willing to do, and they feel like they have to grow. That's usually not the best environment for good decisions. So when you have an operation that's struggling and then the response is, well, we need to grow, it's kind of like, well, yeah, probably that's tough. But so usually it means downsizing. Downsizing is not easy. That means giving up land, or actually probably would mean downsizing equipment, which could have tax implications. I mean, there's a lot here. It's not easy, but basically you need to identify where you're at now, figure out what you need to get to, and then execute a plan to get there. And I have to say this, that's part of farming. That's part of managing a business. Part of your duties is doing that, is understanding that and coming up with a plan that works. And like, that's tough, but that's my observation of usually what's going on a lot of times. And so when someone is in a distressed situation, there's a kind of a spectrum of what that means, but it usually happens over a period of time. It's usually not 1 year that just like derails the whole thing. It's usually been a build up. It's usually things have been tight for a while, or there's been multiple years of losses. This isn't some, you don't wake up one day and be like, yesterday I was gold plated, now I'm like destitute. That's usually not how it happens. It's usually over a period of years, and kind of over a series of multiple restructures and other issues. And then finally, just losses accumulate, leverage accumulates, and then it just gets to like an unworkable position. But one thing I wanted to touch on is like the isolation that can happen, because speak directly to the lender borrower relationship, so the lender and the farmer. So lenders want to lend, they want good relationships, that's how they make money. They have to mitigate their own risk. Their lenders are banks, farm credits are regulated, they have oversight, they have things they can and can't do. They try to stay within certain risk metric, if you will. I mean, you can't loan, if you're a bank, it's probably not a good idea to loan 7 and 8% money to 12 and 15% risk type borrowers. That's not a recipe for success over time. So if they're loaning, and a lot of lenders in the agricultural market, they don't really have a lot of like tiered lenders that hit different risk categories. There are some, but and farmers usually don't want to hear that. It's almost like all or nothing. If you're working like with the bank, you're usually getting similar rates to other people. It might be a little higher if you're kind of a tougher case. But by and large, it's like you either qualify kind of or you don't. You don't really go off into like a hard money type lender who's like, hey, we deal in higher risk, and we'll loan 12% on your land loans and 12% on your operating. I mean, it is out there, but that's just a tough game, because banks will usually ride with someone well beyond what they probably should, honestly, given their risk appetite. But the big thing here is that I think a lot of farmers, they think that their lender is going to like help them out, like help them come up with a strategy, and that happens. Usually there needs to be an agreed upon strategy, and that can come with the help of your lender. But they also have to, the lender has to be careful too, because it can't be just their plan that you sign off on and then you go out and try to execute it and it doesn't go well. That can put the lender in a really bad position. So they need to be really careful about that too. And the further down the path that an operation goes with being distressed, the more it kind of puts the lender in a position that they need to be careful about what they say. They might not be as loose with what they say. They might not be as forward with their opinions. So what happens is the farmer thinks that as things have gotten worse, that I've actually noticed a change in their lender. Like, hey, now you're kind of being weird to me. You're not as, you're kind of vague. You're kind of, yeah, give us an update, give us a plan. And then if the banks kind of hold, well, we need more information, it's renewal season, the farmer doesn't know what to do, who else do they turn to? They could go talk to their accountant, but your accountant usually doesn't have lending experience. They don't usually have credit experience. They oftentimes have a narrow range of expertise that really isn't, to some extent, you wouldn't even really call a lot of it business strategy. A lot of it's just accounting, and just straight up accounting, or like tax law. Like, they have input that's relevant for your business, but they're not like a business advisor, meaning that they're looking to maximize the business as opposed to like looking to maximize just looking at the tax implications. My point is that a farmer can all of a sudden feel like the bank's kind of shutting down, getting a weird feeling. Feels like his lender or their lender that they've had good relationship, maybe they give him the benefit of the doubt. Gosh, maybe Ben's just got some pressure on his shoulders, and I don't know why he just seemed kind of took a little bit different stance last time we were in there, and a little confused. Point here is that if the farmer doesn't have a handle on why they're in this position, back to my earlier point, if you chalk it up to, I just didn't work hard enough last year, or I didn't hit the high on the prices, we have to wait for a price rally, it's just prices are down, that removes agency from you, especially the price one. There's not a lot of like, if someone says I just have to hit the high price, how do you execute that going forward? Fundamentally, you can't, because none of us know when the high price is. So it's a flawed plan because it's unrealistic. It is no plan. It's a desire. It's not a executable plan. But on the other hand, if you said, irrespective of price, I've got $150, $170 an acre in equipment payments. My average land rent is 120% of peer. I've grown rapidly. See what I'm saying? Irrespective of price, you can actually come up with a plan to try to change those metrics. Try to change your cost structure. But my point is a farmer that isn't, you have a problem and you have to look at how to solve it. But if you're not looking at the right things to solve it, you're not going down the right path, and your lender starts to shut down. Now you feel isolated. Now they're being weird. Now they're being iffy if they're even going to finance you this year. They tell you to go look for other financing. You say, well, Tim down at the other bank, he's always, when I see him around town, said if you ever want to come to us, just let him know or stop in. So, God, I'll take him up on it. So then you go call Tim. It's right during busy renewal season. You go down the street, make an appointment, come in, bring your financials. He goes through them. Guess what? What incentive does this person have to say the hard things, that, or even ability, even if they have the ability? Let's give the person the benefit and say that they are a very astute, shrewd type credit person, and they see what the issue is. Does that person really need to tell you? They could. This new lender could say, you need to get your costs down. They could do that, but oftentimes they don't. Sometimes they just say, hey, you know, we've got kind of a lot going on, and, you know, right now just probably isn't the best time. We'd love to look at it next year or something. They can, if you're way off the page as far as being a bankable deal for them that year, and they're busy, what incentive does this lender have, right? I mean, I've just seen it so many times where they just keep getting polite no's, and people, when when you go solicit a new lender, they will oftentimes be polite, and they might say, hey, we'd love to work with you, just not now. They might even kind of boost you up a little bit, and it just leaves you feeling confused. So then you come back home, you're like, okay, we haven't really got anything new. I know there's a problem. I don't know what to do, though. Our bank said they need more time to think about it. I guess it's got to go to some new level of oversight that hasn't had to happen before, which that's kind of concerning. That makes me think, God, am I on some sort of new list or something? Our neighbor banks where we do, and he's never said anything. I know their appointment was a week before mine, and I think they're ready to go next year. So I guess we'll just wait, and it's a tough position to be in. And that's what I would highlight, is that there's this loneliness to it. So I've thought for years that to be an independent person that can look at a situation and just say, it's like a doctor diagnosing what's wrong. If you can't diagnose the actual problem, you can't fix it. Yeah, it's as simple as that. And if you have someone who's objective and doesn't have a dog in the fight, doesn't have a horse in the race, whatever, a bank that has millions of dollars out to someone might be careful about what they say, and they might be more of in a defensive posture to try to limit their risk. They might already think it's too far gone, and they're trying to take steps just to minimize their risk. So the bank is going to try to manage their risk. It's related to your risk, but it's not the same. A bank could finance a failing operation and actually come out fine, theoretically. That's not what they want to do. That's my point. They are going to take steps to guard their position. They are going to be thinking in terms of what protects them first, less so about, would this be best for the farmer? Now, that's a general statement, could offend some people, but I think generally speaking, when it comes down to brass tacks, the bank is, if you take the premise that the bank is going to protect their position, because why wouldn't they? I think it starts to add clarity to what's going on, and also understand that the bank can't be 100% protected, 100% transparent in a way. They have to be transparent to an extent, but a lender is not going to tell you, hey, I got to be honest with you, I just got out of a meeting downstairs where two of my higher ups gave me a big pep talk before coming to talk to you. They said, whatever you do, do not give them hope. God, do not say this, do not say that. Tell them we need to mitigate this, we need to mitigate that. They need to do this, they need to do that, because it needs to get our bank in a position where, maybe we can move forward, maybe we can't, but we have to get our bank put in a safer position here. So to wrap this video up, said a lot here, but let me know in the comments whether you think I have some points. I know there's counterpoints, every case is different, but speaking in generalities, I think there's a lot to think about here. But if you've ever been in a kind of a distressed situation, does this speak to you? Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Share this with people if you feel they'd get value out of it. And thank you for watching.